The rain hit my face like tiny needles, each drop colder than the last. I stood outside my daughter's house, watching her silhouette disappear behind custom curtains that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. My shoes squelched with every step as I began the long walk home, my arthritis already protesting in the damp November air. She had no idea that the mansion she'd just sent me away from was built on land I still owned. She had no idea about a lot of things. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I could have called my driver. Could have had Bernard pick me up in the Bentley that sat idle in my garage just 500 feet away, hidden behind a wall of pristine hedges. But I didn't. Instead, I walked through that storm, letting every drop remind me why I'd kept my secret for so long. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in rain and regret. The party invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, elegant cream cardstock with gold embossing. Rebecca's housewarming. After 2 years of silence, my daughter was finally reaching out. My hands had trembled as I read it, hope blooming in my chest like flowers after a drought. She wanted me there. Perhaps things could finally heal between us. What a fool I'd been. My name is Patricia Martin, though everyone's called me Pat since. I was knee-high to a grasshopper. 73 years old last August, with hands that have built more than they've destroyed, and eyes that have seen fortunes made and lost. Most folks who meet me now see exactly what I want them to see. A retired schoolteacher living modestly in Willow Creek, shopping sales at the grocery store, driving a sensible 10-year-old Honda Civic that rattles when it goes over 40. They don't see the empire I built from nothing. They don't know about the patents I hold, the companies I've quietly acquired, or the real estate portfolio that spans 3 states. They certainly don't know about the mansion on Rosewood Drive, purchased through a trust so byzantine that even my lawyer gets confused sometimes. I've played this role so long that sometimes I almost forget who I really am. But I never forget why I started pretending. Rebecca was born during a blizzard 35 years ago, when I was still young and foolish enough to believe love conquered all. Her father, Daniel, had swept me off my feet with his charm and promises. He was everything I wasn't: sophisticated, educated at fancy schools, from a family whose name opened doors mine couldn't even approach. I was just Pat from the wrong side of town, daughter of a seamstress and a mechanic who died when I was 12. Daniel left before Rebecca's 2nd birthday. Not for another woman or another life, but because I'd had the audacity to succeed. My little cleaning business had exploded into a multi-state operation. The man who'd married beneath him couldn't handle his wife earning more than his trust fund provided. He took our daughter and his bruised ego back to his family's compound in Connecticut, leaving me with visiting rights and a heart that felt like shattered glass. The custody battle was brutal. Money talks, and the Morrison family had been having conversations with judges for generations. I got weekends and alternating holidays. The judge, a golf buddy of Daniel's father, suggested I should be grateful for that much. After all, what kind of environment could a working woman provide compared to the Morrison estate? So I made a decision that would define the next 3 decades of my life. If they wanted to paint me as the poor relation, the unfortunate mistake in Daniel's past, then that's exactly what I'd be. I sold my visible assets, restructured everything through shell companies and trusts, and became invisible. Pat Martin, the ambitious entrepreneur, vanished. In her place stood Pat Martin, the humble schoolteacher who drove sensible cars and lived in a modest house. Every other weekend, I'd pick up Rebecca in that year's carefully chosen used car, wearing clothes from Target instead of Neiman Marcus. We'd eat at diners instead of 5-star restaurants, shop at thrift stores for treasures, and I'd teach her the value of hard work and simple pleasures. I thought I was protecting her from her father's family's materialism. I thought I was teaching her authentic values. What I was really doing was lying to my daughter for 33 years. The early years were magical despite the pretense. Rebecca would run to me at pickup time, her little arms outstretched, calling Mama Pat, because Daniel had insisted she call his new wife Mommy. We'd spend our weekends at the park, the library, the community pool. I taught her to bake. Cookies from scratch, to sew buttons, to appreciate sunsets and butterflies and the sound of rain on windows. She'd tell me about her other life sometimes, about the horses and the private tutors and the vacations to places I pretended I'd never been. I'd listen and smile and say things like, "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," while biting back the urge to tell her about the European factories I owned or the board meetings I attended via phone while she slept. The pretense grew harder as she got older. Teenagers have sharp eyes and sharper questions. "Why don't you ever come to my school events?" she'd ask. "Because your father's family had made it clear I wasn't welcome at prestigious Ashford Academy, not in my Toyota and department store clothes. Why can't we take a real vacation?" Because real vacations would mean credit cards with my name on them, and those would lead to questions I couldn't answer. I compensated with love, pouring everything I had into those precious weekends. We had our traditions. Saturday morning pancakes shaped like animals. Sunday afternoon walks where we'd make up stories about the people we passed. Bedtime talks that stretched until she could barely keep her eyes open. I knew every friend's name, every crush, every fear and dream she was willing to share. The Fishers started showing during her college years. Daniel's family paid for Yale, naturally, and suddenly my daughter was surrounded by people who summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen. She'd come home talking about internships at companies I secretly owned, excitedly describing innovations I'd personally greenlit. The irony was physically painful sometimes. "You wouldn't understand, Mom," became her favorite phrase. She wasn't cruel about it, just matter of fact. How could a public school teacher understand venture capital? How could someone who shopped at discount stores appreciate the nuances of Fashion Week? She started skipping weekends, too busy with networking events and gatherings I couldn't attend. I let her go. What else could I do? Pull back the curtain and reveal 3 decades of deception? Explain that her poor mother could buy and sell her precious Morrison family 10 times over? The truth had grown too large, too complicated. It would destroy everything we'd built, make her question every memory, every lesson, every moment of love I'd given her. After graduation, the distance grew. She took a job at Morrison Industries, fell in love with someone from their world, got married in a ceremony where I sat in the back row like a distant relative. I smiled through it all, playing my part perfectly. The help, the embarrassment. The mother who didn't quite fit. 2 years ago, she cut me off entirely. The catalyst was laughably small. I'd worn the wrong dress to a charity function. Not inappropriate, just wrong. Off the rack when everyone else was in designer. She'd pulled me aside, cheeks flaming, and hissed, "Do you do this on purpose? Do you enjoy humiliating me?" I'd stood there speechless as she continued. "I've tried, Mom. I've really tried. But you refuse to even attempt to fit into my life. It's like you're proud of being less." The word hung between us like a blade. I need some space, some time to figure out if there's a place for you in my world. Those were the last words she'd spoken to me until that invitation arrived. I'd respected her wishes, though it nearly killed me. No calls, no texts, no attempted visits. I threw myself into my work, expanding into emerging markets, developing new technologies, building wealth that felt increasingly meaningless without someone to share it with. The mansion next to hers? I'd bought it through a shell company the week after she'd moved in, just to be close to her. Pathetic? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe. But when you've spent your life pretending to be poor while actually being rich, you become an expert at self-deception too. The truth was, I'd painted myself into an impossible corner. Every year that passed made the deception harder to undo. How do you tell your daughter that her entire understanding of her childhood was based on a lie? How do you explain that every sacrifice she thought you made was actually just theater? That the struggling mother she'd been embarrassed by could have solved every problem with a phone call? You don't. You can't. So you continue the charade until it becomes your prison. The night of the party, I'd chosen my outfit carefully. Not too shabby, that would embarrass her. Not too nice, that would raise questions. I settled on a 5-year-old dress from Macy's, respectable but forgettable, paired with shoes that had seen better days but were polished to a shine. I wrapped her gift in paper from the dollar store, though the antique music box inside was worth more than most cars. Bernard had wanted to drive me. "At least let me drop you off around the corner," he'd pleaded. My staff knew about Rebecca, knew about the pretense, though they didn't understand it. How could they? How could anyone understand choosing poverty over truth, isolation over revelation? "I'll drive myself," I'd told him, climbing into the Honda that wheezed and protested every mile. The Bentley, the Mercedes, the vintage Rolls. Royce all stayed safely hidden in the climate-controlled garage of my real home. Pat Martin, retired schoolteacher, didn't own such things. The drive to Rebecca's house took 12 minutes. I'd timed it. 12 minutes from my mansion to hers, though she believed I lived 45 minutes away in a modest suburb. Another lie in an ocean of them. I parked 3 blocks away, not wanting my embarrassing car in her driveway among the BMWs and Teslas. The walk gave me time to prepare, to slip fully into character. Shoulders slightly hunched, pace careful but not too. Slow, smile warm but not too confident. I'd become an actress without ever auditioning for the role, method acting my way through my daughter's life. Her house was blazing with light, every window golden against the November darkness. Cars filled the driveway and lined the street. Through the windows, I could see figures moving, holding champagne flutes, dressed in cocktail attire that made my dress look exactly as outdated as it was. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself forward. She'd invited me. That meant something. It had to. The front door was slightly open, letting music and laughter spill into the night. I knocked anyway, a lifetime of careful manners demanding it. A young woman I didn't recognize answered, her smile freezing slightly when she took in my appearance. "You're here for the party?" she asked, doubt coloring her tone. "I'm Rebecca's mother," I said, watching understanding dawn in her eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been pity. "Oh, of course. Come in. Rebecca's in the main room." She stepped aside, and I entered my daughter's world. The house was stunning. I knew it would be. I'd reviewed the architectural plans when she'd bought it, though she'd never know that. My company had actually held the previous mortgage, another cosmic irony in a life full of them. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over marble floors. Artwork I recognized, some pieces I'd bid on at auction through intermediaries, adorned the walls. It was elegant, sophisticated, everything she'd been raised to value by the Morrisons. I found her holding court in the living room, resplendent in a black dress that probably cost more than the Honda. She was laughing at something a man in an Italian suit was saying, her head thrown back, diamond earrings catching the light. My heart constricted. She looked so much like I had at that age, back when I'd worn similar dresses to similar parties, before I'd chosen to hide. She saw me then, and the laughter died on her lips. The group around her followed her gaze, and I watched their expressions shift as they categorized me. Not one of us. The mother. The embarrassment. I'd seen those looks 1,000 times, but they still cut. "Mom," Rebecca said, crossing to me with the careful steps of someone approaching a potentially dangerous situation. "You came." "You invited me," I said simply, offering the wrapped gift. "Congratulations on the house, sweetheart. It's beautiful." She took the package with the tips of her fingers, as if poverty might be contagious. "Thank you," Let me introduce you to some people. What followed was 45 minutes of excruciating politeness. Rebecca paraded me through groups of her friends and colleagues, each introduction carefully calibrated to minimize damage. This is my mother, Pat. She's a retired teacher. The emphasis on retired always stung, as if my imaginary career was safely in the past, unable to contaminate her present. I smiled and nodded and made appropriate small talk, even as I recognized half the people there. The CEO of a company I was quietly acquiring, a board member from a nonprofit I funded anonymously, the wife of a senator who'd personally thanked me for campaign contributions he'd never know came from the woman he was now looking through. The breaking point came when someone asked about my retirement. "It must be nice," the woman said, her tone suggesting anything but having all that. "Free time now. Rebecca's told us you live quite a distance away. Do you travel much?" Before I could answer, Rebecca interjected. "Mom's not really the traveling type. She's more comfortable staying close to home. Familiar surroundings, you know." The condescension in her voice was new. Or maybe I'd just been too hopeful to hear it before. I was being managed, handled, like a problem to be contained. The rage that bubbled up surprised me with its intensity. Not at them, these people who saw only what I'd trained them to see, but at myself, for creating this elaborate prison, for sacrificing truth for a principle my daughter had never asked me to uphold. "Actually," I began, then stopped. What was the point? 3 decades of lies couldn't be undone at a cocktail party. "You're right, I do prefer familiar surroundings." Rebecca's relief was palpable. Crisis averted, mother contained. The conversation moved on to safer topics, and I excused myself to find the restroom, needing a moment to compose myself. The house was even more impressive beyond the public spaces. I wandered a bit, noting the details: heated floors, smart home technology, a kitchen that would make professional chefs weep. Everything top of the line, everything perfect. In her study, I glimpsed financial documents on her desk and had to suppress a bitter laugh. She was leveraged to the hilt, the house mortgaged at a rate that made me wince. If she only knew that I held the note, that I could erase her debt with a single phone call. But she didn't know, because I'd made sure she couldn't know. When I returned to the party, something had shifted. Rebecca stood near the bar with a group of women her age, and their body language screamed gossip. I heard my name and froze just out of sight. "I don't know how you stand it," one of them was saying. "If my mother dressed like that, I'd die." "You have no idea," Rebecca replied, and the whine in her voice was evident. "Every family event, every important moment, there she is, looking like she raided a clearance rack. Do you know she drove here in a car that's probably worth less than my monthly wine budget?" They laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Can't you buy her something decent?" another woman suggested. My mother-in-law was the same way until Richard took her shopping. "I've tried," Rebecca said. "She returns everything, says it's too much. I think she does it to spite me, honestly. Like she's proud of being an embarrassment." "Maybe she's just jealous," the first woman offered. "It can't be easy seeing your daughter succeed when haven't." "Maybe," Rebecca agreed. "Sometimes I think she resents me for having what she couldn't give me. Like it's my fault Dad's family had money and she didn't." I must have made a sound because they all turned. Rebecca's face went white, then red. The other women scattered like startled birds, suddenly remembering urgent conversations elsewhere. "Mom," she said. "I didn't. How long were you?" "Long enough," I said quietly. The gift I'd brought sat unopened on a side table. I picked it up, suddenly needing something to do with my hands. "I should go." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, we were just talking. You know how these things are." "Yes," I said. "I know exactly how these things are." Something in my tone made her step back. For just a moment, I let the mask slip. Let her see a flash of the woman who'd built an empire, who'd crushed competitors and made fortunes. She blinked, confused, and I quickly looked away. "Enjoy your party," I said, heading for the door. "The house really is lovely." "Mom, wait." She followed me, heels clicking on marble. "Let me at least call you a cab. It's starting to rain." I looked outside. Indeed, the November sky had opened up, releasing a steady downpour that was already forming puddles on her pristine walkway. "I'll be fine," I said. "Don't be ridiculous. It's pouring. You can't walk to your car in this." "I parked a few blocks away," I admitted, watching her face tighten with fresh embarrassment. "Of course you did," she muttered, then louder. "Just wait inside until it passes, or let me drive you to your car at least." "In front of your guests?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Wouldn't want to embarrass you further." Her face flushed. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I was so tired suddenly, tired of pretending, tired of smiling, tired of being less when I was so much more. "Go back to your party, Rebecca. Your real friends are waiting." I stepped into the rain before she could respond. It was cold, shockingly so, but almost welcome after the stifling atmosphere inside. I heard her call after me once, but when I didn't turn, she retreated into her golden house and shut the door. The rain intensified as I walked, soaking through my coat in minutes. My shoes, already worn, quickly became waterlogged. The arthritis in my knees, which I'd been ignoring all evening, flared with each step. 3 blocks had never seemed so far. By the time I reached the Honda, I was drenched. My hands shook as I fumbled for keys, water streaming down my face. The car, temperamental in the best of weather, chose that moment to be difficult. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. I sat there in the dark, rain drumming on the roof, and laughed. It was that or cry, and I'd done enough crying over the years. On the 3rd try, the engine caught. I drove slowly, carefully, not toward the modest apartment Rebecca believed I lived in, but toward my real home. The gates opened automatically as I approached, recognizing the car despite its humble appearance. The security guard, if he was, surprised to see me arriving drenched and disheveled, didn't show it. The garage was warm and welcoming. I parked the Honda between the Bentley and the Mercedes, its shabby normalcy almost comic in such company. Bernard appeared before I'd even turned off the engine, holding a towel and wearing an expression of carefully controlled concern. "Shall I draw you a bath, ma'am?" he asked, as if finding me soaked to the skin was perfectly ordinary. "Please," I said, accepting the towel gratefully. "And perhaps some tea." "Of course. The usual?" "The usual." He hesitated, then added quietly, "The young lady called. From next door. She seemed concerned." I paused in toweling my hair. "Rebecca called here?" "She called your cell, ma'am. Multiple times. When you didn't answer, she somehow found this number. I told her I was house-sitting for the owner who was traveling. She asked me to have you call if I heard from you." Of course. Even in concern, she didn't know she was calling her mother's house. The irony was perfect in its cruelty. "Thank you, Bernard. I'll handle it." He nodded and disappeared to prepare my bath. I stood in my garage, water still dripping from my ruined dress, surrounded by cars worth more than most people's houses, and wondered how I'd let it get this far. The elaborate deception that had started as protection had become a labyrinth with no exit. I looked through the garage window toward Rebecca's house. Every light was still on, the party continuing despite the rain, or perhaps because of it. There was nothing like drama to make an evening memorable. I wondered what story she was telling now. The poor mother who'd stormed off into the rain rather than accept help. The prideful woman who couldn't admit she needed assistance. If only she knew the truth. that her mother owned the house next door, that the struggling teacher had enough wealth to buy entire neighborhoods, that every slight she'd delivered, every condescension she'd offered, had been absorbed by a woman who could destroy her financial stability with a single phone call. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Because beneath all the lies and pretense, she was still my daughter, the little girl who'd made me Mother's Day cards from construction paper and glitter, who'd trusted me with her secrets and fears, who'd loved me before she learned to be ashamed of me. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step an effort. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide whether to return her calls, whether to continue the charade, or finally reveal the truth. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the consequences of decades of deception. But tonight, I just wanted to wash away the rain and the humiliation and the terrible weight of being unseen in plain sight. Tonight, I wanted to stop being Pat Martin, the retired teacher, and just be Patricia Martin, the woman who'd built an empire and lost a daughter in the process. The bath was perfect, hot enough to ease the ache in my joints and scented with lavender to calm my racing thoughts. I sank into it gratefully, letting the water embrace me the way my daughter couldn't. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming, against windows that looked out on a world that had no idea who I really was, just like Rebecca. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through rain-washed windows. I woke in my emperor-sized bed, surrounded by Egyptian cotton sheets that Rebecca would never believe her poor mother could afford. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd slept better in my soaked clothes in the Honda than I did now in all this luxury. My phone showed 17 missed calls, 12 from Rebecca, 5 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably her friends, enlisted to help locate the wayward mother who'd vanished into the storm. I listened to the first voicemail, then deleted the rest unheard. Her voice had carried the same tone she used when dealing with difficult vendors at work. Frustrated, inconvenienced, but ultimately obligated to resolve the situation. Bernard had laid out my breakfast in the solarium, as he did every morning. Fresh fruit, artisanal bread, preserves from a small farm in Vermont I'd invested in years ago. The Wall Street Journal sat folded beside my plate, though I already knew what it would say. The merger I'd orchestrated through shell companies had gone through. Another few million added to accounts Rebecca didn't know existed. I was reaching for my coffee when Margaret, my housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. Her usually composed face showed signs of distress. "Ma'am, there's a situation," she said carefully. "The neighbor is at the gate." My hand stilled. "Rebecca?" "Yes, ma'am. She's quite insistent about speaking to the owner. I told her you were traveling, as per your instructions, but she won't leave. She says it's about an elderly woman who might be in danger." Of course. My daughter playing the concerned citizen while really trying to track down her embarrassing mother. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate calm. What exactly did she say? Margaret consulted the tablet she carried for household management. She said her mother left her house in the storm last night and never made it home. She's checking with all the neighbors to see if anyone saw anything. She seems... Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully, genuinely distressed. Through the solarium's glass walls, I could see the gate at the end of my drive. Rebecca's silver Tesla waited there, a gleaming reminder of the life she'd built without me. Or rather, the life she thought she'd built without me. If she only knew how many of her opportunities had been quietly orchestrated, how many doors had opened because Patricia Martin had made a call or pulled a string. "Tell her the owner is in Tokyo," I said finally. "But that you'll check the security footage and call if anything turns up." Margaret nodded and retreated. I watched through the windows as she walked down the drive, her professional demeanor never wavering. The conversation was brief. Rebecca gestured animatedly, clearly frustrated, but eventually drove away. Not toward her house, I noticed, but in the direction of my supposed apartment. She'd find nothing there, of course. The building manager, well compensated for his discretion, would tell her that Ms. Martin had returned home safely last night and left early this morning for a senior center activity. Another lie in an endless chain of them. I spent the morning in my study, trying to focus on quarterly reports and acquisition proposals. But my mind kept drifting to Rebecca's party, to the words I'd overheard. Each memory was like pressing on a bruise. Painful, but somehow impossible to resist. The truth was, I'd created this situation. Every choice I'd made, from the initial deception to its decades-long maintenance, had led to this moment. I'd told myself I was protecting her, teaching her values, keeping her grounded. But somewhere along the way, the lie had become bigger than both of us. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. The caller ID showed Harrison Blackwell, my primary attorney, and one of the few people who knew the full extent of my empire. Patricia. His cultured voice carried a note of concern. I heard about last night. I shouldn't have been surprised. Harrison's network was extensive, and gossip from Rebecca's party would have traveled fast through certain circles. News. Travels quickly, I said. When Patricia Martin walks through a storm rather than accept a ride, people notice, he said dryly, even if they don't realize they're noticing Patricia Martin. They saw what they expected to see, a stubborn old woman too proud to accept help. Is that what you are now? Stubborn and old? I laughed despite myself. Getting older, certainly. The stubborn part's been there all along. Indeed. He paused. You know this can't continue indefinitely. The Rosewood Trust is up for renewal next month. The apartment building holdings need to be restructured. At some point, Rebecca will stumble across something. He was right, of course. The financial web I'd woven was complex, but not impenetrable. As Rebecca rose through the business world, the chances of accidental discovery increased. Just last month, she'd mentioned working on a project that would intersect with one of my companies. I'd had to quietly redirect the initiative to protect my secret. I know, I admitted. But after 35 years, how do you tell someone their entire life has been based on a lie? With words generally, Harrison said, preferably clear ones. You make it sound simple. I make it sound necessary. There's a difference. After we hung up, I wandered through my house, all 12,000 square feet of it. Each room held pieces of the life I'd built in shadow. The art collection that rivaled major museums, the library with first editions Rebecca would have loved, the screening room where I watched her favorite movies alone, imagining different conversations we might have had. In my office, I pulled out a leather journal from a locked drawer. Inside were letters I'd written but never sent, one for each birthday, each milestone, each moment when the truth had almost broken free. Hundreds of pages of words she'd never read, apologies she'd never hear, explanations that grew more complicated with each passing year. The latest entry was from last month, the day I'd seen her promotion announcement in the business section. My daughter, Vice President of Strategic Development at Morrison Industries. The photo had shown her shaking hands with the CEO, unaware that her mother had recommended her for the position through careful, untraceable influence. I'd written, "My darling girl, you earned this, whatever else you might think when the truth comes out. Know that you earned every success through your own brilliance. I just made sure the doors were unlocked. You're the one who walked through them." A sound from outside caught my attention. Rebecca's Tesla was back, this time parked directly in front of my gates. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at my house with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. My phone buzzed with a text. "Mom, I know you're in there. The security guard described the woman he saw last night. Please, just talk to me." My blood chilled. Of course. She'd always been too smart for her own good, or mine. The security guard at the community entrance would have logged my Honda, would have seen me drive toward this house. It wouldn't take much for Rebecca to piece together that the mysterious owner and her missing mother had arrived within minutes of each other. I watched as she got out of her car and approached the intercom. Her finger hovered over the button for a long moment before she pressed it. "This is Rebecca Morrison." Her voice crackled through the speaker in my study. "I need to speak with Patricia Martin. I know she's there. This is about... It's a family emergency." Morrison. She'd used her married name, or rather, her father's name that she'd taken back after her divorce. Another small rejection, another careful distance placed between us. Margaret appeared in my doorway, awaiting instructions. I could send her away, again, maintain the fiction. Or I could end 3 decades of deception with the press of a button. "Ma'am?" Margaret prompted gently. "Let her in," I heard myself say. "Send her to the front study. I'll be down shortly." Margaret's eyes widened. Slightly. She'd never seen me receive anyone in this house as myself, but she nodded and left to execute my wishes. I stood before my mirror, considering what to wear. The designer clothes that filled my closet seemed wrong somehow, but so did the simple outfits I wore as Pat. In the end, I chose middle ground. Well-made but understated, expensive but not ostentatious. I kept the necklace Rebecca had given me for my 60th birthday, a simple gold chain she'd saved for months to afford. One truth among all the lies. The walk to the front study felt both endless and too quick. Through the partially open door, I could see Rebecca standing by the window, her posture rigid with tension. She'd changed from last night's party dress into jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more like the girl I remembered. I paused in the doorway, watching her take in the room. Her eyes tracked over the built-in bookshelves, the original Monet above the fireplace, the Persian rug that cost more than her car. I saw the exact moment when recognition began to dawn, not of the objects themselves, but of their worth, their authenticity, their implication. "Hello, Rebecca," I said quietly. She spun around, her face a kaleidoscope of emotions. "Mom?" The word came out strangled, uncertain. "What are you? Whose house is this?" "Mine," I said simply. "Would you like to sit down?" "Yours?" She didn't move. "That's impossible. You live in Garden Heights. You drive a Honda. You shop at discount stores. You're a retired teacher." "I do drive a Honda," I conceded. "The rest is more complicated." She sank into one of the leather armchairs, her legs apparently no longer willing to support her. I took the chair across from her, the coffee table between us feeling like an ocean. "I don't understand," she said. "Is this some kind of joke? Are you house-sitting or something?" "No joke, no house-sitting. This is my home. One of them, anyway." "One of them?" Her voice pitched higher. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I'd imagined this conversation so many times, scripted it 100 different ways, but now, faced with her confusion and growing anger, all my prepared words evaporated. "I own this house," I said. "I bought it through a trust when you moved in next door. I also own the apartment building in Garden Heights where you think I live, along with several other properties. The Honda is real, but there's also a Bentley and a Mercedes in the garage. I was never a teacher. I built a company, several companies actually, starting when you were a baby. I'm worth..." I paused, the number still surreal even to me. Approximately $800 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. Then she laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Right. My mother, who returns birthday gifts because they're too expensive, is secretly a multimillionaire. Did you hit your head in the storm? Should I call a doctor?" I stood and walked to my desk, retrieving a folder I'd had Harrison prepare months ago, hoping I'd never need it. Inside were documents: incorporation papers, bank statements, property deeds, patent registrations, proof of the empire I'd built while pretending to struggle. I handed it to her wordlessly. She flipped through the pages with growing incredulity. her face paling with each revelation. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Menton Industries. That's one of the biggest logistics companies in the country. Blackwood Technical Solutions. They hold defense contracts. These patents." She looked up at me, eyes wide. "Mom, these are your signatures." "All mine," I confirmed. "Built from a single cleaning service that I started when you were 6 months old." But why?" The folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the Persian rug. "Why would you lie to me? Why would you pretend to be poor? Why would you let me?" She trailed off, but I knew what she couldn't say. "Why would you let me pity you? Why would you let me be ashamed of you? Why would you let me exclude you from my life because I thought you weren't good enough?" "Your father," I began, then had to stop and gather myself. Even after all these years, the wound was tender. When he left, when his family fought for custody, they made it clear that I was unsuitable. Not because I was a bad mother, but because I was successful. A woman who'd out-earned her husband, who'd built something from nothing. They painted me as neglectful, obsessed with money, unable to provide proper maternal care. Rebecca's face had gone very still. "Dad said you chose work over family." "Your father said many things. The courts believed him. Rich families tend to win these battles, especially against women who dare to succeed without permission. I got weekends and alternating holidays, and only because I agreed to their terms." "What terms?" "That I would provide a stable, modest environment for your visits. That I wouldn't confuse you with displays of wealth or involve you in my business affairs. They wanted to ensure you grew up as a Morrison, not tainted by your mother's new money ambitions." I could see her processing this, reconciling it, with whatever narrative she'd been fed growing up. "So you just gave up your success?" she asked. "No, I hid it. I restructured everything through trusts and shell companies. I became invisible in the business world while growing more powerful behind the scenes. To you, to your father's family, to the world, I was Pat Martin, the harmless schoolteacher. But I never stopped building, never stopped growing. I just did it where no one could see." "For 35 years?" Her voice cracked. "You pretended to be poor for 35 years. I told myself I was protecting you. From your father's family's manipulation, from growing up defined by money, from the complications wealth brings. I wanted you to know me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted." "You wanted what?" Now anger was creeping into her voice, color returning to her cheeks. "To humiliate me? To make me look like a snob for being embarrassed by my poor mother? To laugh at me behind my back while I worried about your finances? No!" The word came out sharper than intended. "I never laughed. Every slight, every moment you were ashamed of me, every time you apologized for my appearance or my car or my clothes, it was agony. But I endured it because the alternative was losing you entirely." "Losing me?" She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You did lose me. I cut you off because I couldn't stand the embarrassment anymore. Because I thought you were too proud or too stubborn to try to fit into my world. But you weren't proud. You were lying." I was terrified, I admitted. The longer the deception went on, the harder it became to stop. How could I tell a teenager that everything she believed about her childhood was false? How could I tell a young woman building her career that her struggling mother actually owned half the companies she was trying to impress? How could I tell you any of it without destroying every memory, every lesson, every moment we'd shared? Rebecca whirled to face me. "So instead you let me destroy our relationship? You let me push you away, thinking I was protecting myself from embarrassment? Do you have any idea how guilty I felt? How many therapy sessions I've spent talking about my shame over being embarrassed by my own mother?" "Therapy?" This was news to me. Of course, therapy. Do you think it's easy choosing social acceptance over family? Do you think I felt good about myself, watching you walk away in the rain last night? I've been sick about it, physically sick. And now I find out it was all unnecessary? That you could have called a driver? Could have worn designer clothes? Could have fit in whenever you wanted? She was crying now, angry tears that she wiped away impatiently. I wanted to go to her, comfort her, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. I never meant for it to go this far, I said weakly. Then why didn't you stop it? At any point in 3 decades, why didn't you just tell me the truth? Because I'm a coward, I said simply. Because I convinced myself the lie was noble when really I was just afraid. Afraid of your anger, afraid of losing what little time I had with you, afraid of proving your father right, that money corrupts everything it touches. So you corrupted it with lies instead. She laughed bitterly. Do you know what the irony is? I married Marcus because his family reminded me of Dad's. Old money, established, everything you weren't. I thought I was choosing stability, choosing someone who'd never embarrass me at charity galas or business dinners. And the whole time, my mother could have bought and sold his entire family. I know, I said quietly. I know exactly what Marcus's family is worth. I know about the bad investments his father made, the trust fund that's nearly empty, the image they maintain on credit and reputation. I know he left you because he found someone with fresher money. Rebecca stared at me. How could you possibly know that? Because I've spent 35 years watching from the shadows, protecting you when I could, clearing obstacles you never knew existed. Did you think Morrison Industries just happened to have an opening when you graduated? Did you think the promotion came solely on merit? You earned it, Rebecca. You're brilliant and capable. But I made sure people noticed. You? You've been pulling strings? In my career? Her voice was dangerous now. Not pulling strings, just ensuring fair chances. Your father's family would have blocked you if they'd known how talented you really were. They wanted you ornamental, not successful. I made sure doors opened based on merit, not name. My entire life is a lie, she said flatly. Everything I thought I achieved, everything I thought I knew about myself, about you, none of it was real. Your achievements are real. Your intelligence, your drive, your creativity, that's all you. I just made sure the playing field was level. Level? She picked up one of the scattered bank statements. This isn't level. This is manipulation. This is... I don't even have words for what this is. She moved toward the door and panic flared in my chest. Rebecca, please, let me explain properly. Let me show you... Show me what? She turned back, face flushed with anger and tears. Show me more evidence of how thoroughly you've deceived me? Show me how many other lies I've been living? I can't. I need to think. I need to get away from here. Rebecca. No. She held up a hand. I thought I knew who you were. The struggling mother who sacrificed everything for her child. The woman too proud to accept help, too set in her ways to change. I built my entire identity in relation to that woman, either trying to live up to her sacrifices or trying to distance myself from her limitations, and now I find out she never existed. I existed, I said desperately. I'm still your mother, still the woman who raised you, who loves you. Are you? Because I don't know who you are anymore. Patricia Martin with $800 million? That's not my mother. That's a stranger who's been wearing my mother's face for 3 decades. She left then, walking out with the same determination she'd shown the night before, though this time it was truth rather than rain driving her away. I heard the front door close, heard her car start, heard the gates open to let her pass. I sank back into my chair, surrounded by the scattered proof of my deception. Margaret appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her features. "Shall I clean this up, ma'am?" "Leave it," I said. "It's time I faced the mess I've made." I sat there for hours, watching the sun track across the sky, throwing different patterns on the evidence of my double life. The Monet on the wall, bought the year Rebecca graduated college, seemed to mock me with its peaceful water lilies. I'd acquired beautiful things while my daughter thought I couldn't afford new shoes. I'd built an empire while she believed I lived paycheck to paycheck. The phone rang periodically, Harrison checking in, board members with questions, the usual machinery of wealth grinding on. I ignored them all. What did any of it matter when the one person I'd built it all for couldn't stand to look at me? As afternoon faded to evening, I finally stirred. I walked through my house with new eyes, seeing it as Rebecca must have seen it. The ostentation I'd tried to avoid, the wealth that seeped from every surface despite my attempts at understatement. This wasn't a home, it was a monument to deception. In my bedroom, I opened the safe hidden behind a false panel. Inside, along with documents and jewelry, was a small wooden box. I'd kept it all these years, moving it from house to house, safe to safe. Inside was Rebecca's hospital bracelet, tiny and faded, a lock of her baby hair. The first card she'd made me crayon on construction paper. "I love Mommy." I held these talismans of a simpler time, before the lies, before the careful distance, before everything became so complicated. That baby, that toddler, that little girl, she'd loved. Me without reservation. Before she learned to be ashamed. Before I gave her reasons to be. The irony was bitter. I'd hidden my wealth to keep her authentic, to teach her values beyond money. Instead, I'd taught her that appearances mattered more than truth. That love could be conditional on social status, that even the closest relationships could be built on lies. My phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. "I need time. Please don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. If I'm ever ready." I stared at the words until they blurred. Time. After 35 years of deception, she needed time. It was fair. It was reasonable. It was killing me. I typed back, "Take all the time you need. I love you." That was never a lie. She didn't respond. The read receipt showed she'd seen it, but no bubbles appeared to indicate typing. Just silence, stretching, between us like years. That night, I couldn't bear to sleep in my mansion. Instead, I drove the Honda to the apartment in Garden Heights that had been my cover story for so long. It was small, but comfortable, decorated with the same careful, modest taste I'd cultivated as Pat Martin. Here, surrounded by the props of my false life, I finally let myself cry. Not the bitter tears of anger or the sharp tears of regret, but the deep, grieving sobs of a woman who'd gained an empire and lost a daughter. The walls of that tiny apartment had heard many of my tears over the years, but never like this. Never, with the full weight of truth crushing down. I'd thought I was so clever, maintaining my double life, protecting everyone from harsh realities. But cleverness isn't wisdom, and protection based on lies is just another form of harm. I'd spent so long being two people that I'd forgotten how to be one. And now, exposed in all my contradictions, I wasn't sure who Patricia Martin really was, anymore. The woman in the mirror looked older than her 73 years. Not broken, not yet, but bent under the weight of choices that had seemed so right at the time. Each lie had been a small thing, justified by love and fear in equal measure. But small lies, like small debts, accumulate interest. And after 35 years, the bill had finally come due. I made tea in the tiny kitchen, using the same cheap kettle Rebecca remembered from her childhood. The whistle was shrill and familiar, a sound that had punctuated so many of our conversations. How many times had we sat at this very table, sharing dreams and gossip over steaming cups. How many times had I bitten back the truth, choosing the comfort of familiarity over the disruption of honesty? The apartment felt like a museum now, each object a relic of my deception. The thrift store dishes we'd eaten countless meals on while I had fine china locked away, the second-hand furniture I'd carefully selected to look respectable but not expensive. The photos on the walls, all carefully curated to show a life of modest happiness rather than extraordinary success. I wondered if Rebecca was in her own home now, looking at her possessions with new eyes, wondering which opportunities had been real and which had been orchestrated, questioning every memory, every achievement, every moment of our shared past. I'd given her wealth beyond imagining, but I'd stolen something more valuable: her ability to trust her own story. The night dragged on, sleepless and heavy. I found myself at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, my daughter was grappling with the truth. Somewhere out there, the consequences of my choices were rippling outward, changing the shape of both our lives. When dawn finally came, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, I was still at the window, still waiting, still hoping that somewhere in the wreckage of our relationship, we might find pieces worth salvaging. But hope, I was learning, was just another luxury I could no longer afford. The days that followed blurred together like watercolors in rain. I moved between my two homes, the mansion that mocked me with its emptiness and the apartment that felt like a costume I could no longer wear. Neither felt real anymore. I existed in a liminal space between the woman I'd pretended to be and the woman I'd hidden, finding comfort in neither identity. Harrison called daily with business that couldn't wait. Acquisitions in progress, contracts, requiring signatures, board meetings that needed my input. I handled it all with mechanical efficiency, making decisions worth millions while feeling worth nothing. Money, I'd learned too late, was a poor substitute for authenticity. On the 5th day, an unexpected visitor arrived at the mansion. Not Rebecca. I'd have known her car's engine anywhere. But Marcus, her ex-husband. He stood at my door in a Tom Ford suit that had seen better days, his smile practiced but his eyes calculating. "Mrs. Martin," he said, and I noticed he didn't seem surprised by the grandeur surrounding me. "I think we should talk." I could have sent him away. Should have, probably. But curiosity won. I led him to the formal sitting room, the one I never used, its coldness matching my mood. "Rebecca told you," I said. It wasn't a question. She did. He settled into a chair with the confidence of a man who'd grown up in rooms like this. Quite the revelation, though I'll admit, it explains a few things that never quite added up. Such as the way certain doors opened for Rebecca, the mysterious investor who saved Morrison Industries from that hostile takeover, the convenient timing of various opportunities. He studied me with sharp eyes. "You've been quite the puppet master." "I protected my daughter's interests," I said evenly. "Nothing more. Nothing less, either." He leaned forward. "Do you know why I really left her?" "Because you found someone with more accessible money. The Vanderbilt girl." His smile widened. "You do know everything. But that's only part of it. I left because Rebecca could never be satisfied. Nothing was ever enough. Not the house, not the status, not the success. She was always reaching for something she couldn't name. Now I understand why. She was trying to fill a hole left by believing her mother was less than she was." The words stung because they held truth. "What do you want, Marcus?" "Nothing," he said, surprising me. "I came to tell you something. Rebecca's been staying at the St. Regis downtown, room 412. She's been there since she left your house, ordering room service and speaking to no one. I thought you should know." "Why would you tell me this?" He stood, straightening his worn cuffs. "Because despite everything, I loved her once. And the woman I loved was shaped by you. by the mother she thought was poor but proud, who taught her values beyond money. That woman was worth loving. I'd hate to see her disappear entirely into bitterness. After he left, I sat with his information like a weight in my hands. Rebecca was at the St. Regis, hiding in a hotel I owned through 3 layers of corporate structure. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so painful. I didn't go to her. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I went to work visibly. The next morning, I dressed in clothes that fit who I really was. Elegant, expensive, unmistakably successful. Bernard drove me in the Bentley to the headquarters of Menton Industries, the flagship company of my empire. The building bore no sign of my ownership, just sleek glass and steel reaching toward the sky. The security guard did a double take when I entered. The executives I passed in the halls whispered in my wake. Patricia Martin, the ghost in the machine, had materialized in their midst. I spent the day reviewing operations I usually handled remotely, sitting in on meetings where my presence turned routine discussions into nervous performances. It wasn't cruelty that drove me, it was necessity. I needed to remember who I was beyond the mother Rebecca had rejected, needed to ground myself in accomplishments that existed independent of my failures as a parent. In the afternoon, I visited the R&D department, where young engineers were working on sustainable packaging solutions I'd commissioned. Their enthusiasm was infectious, their innovation genuine. They didn't know me as Rebecca's mother or Pat the pretend teacher. To them, I was simply the woman who funded their dreams and demanded excellence in return. The prototype is ahead of schedule, the department head told me proudly. If the tests pan out, we could revolutionize shipping sustainability. I smiled, the first real smile in days. Good. The world needs revolutionizing. That evening, I attended a charity gala I'd previously planned to skip. The cause, literacy programs for underprivileged children, was one I'd supported anonymously for years. Tonight, I walked in as myself. The ripple of recognition through the ballroom was almost physical. Patricia Martin, the reclusive billionaire, had emerged from her shadows. Conversations stuttered, heads turned, and within minutes, I was surrounded by people eager to connect with someone they'd only known through rumors and proxy representatives. I navigated the social waters with skills I hadn't used in decades, making small talk about market trends and philanthropic initiatives. Several people mentioned Rebecca, careful probes to understand our relationship. I deflected gracefully, giving nothing away while maintaining perfect poise. Halfway through the evening, I spotted a familiar face. Diane Morrison, my former mother-in-law, holding court near the bar. She'd aged well, her patrician features still sharp, her bearing still regal. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw. The exact moment recognition dawned. She approached slowly, as if I might vanish if she moved too quickly. Patricia? Patricia Martin? Hello, Diane. But you're supposed to be... She gestured vaguely, unable to finish the sentence. Poor? Unsuccessful? Unsuitable? I sipped my champagne calmly. Yes, that was rather the point. Her face cycled through emotions, confusion, anger, something that might have been respect. All these years, the court hearings, the custody arrangements, the restrictions we placed, and you were already building what would become a significant business empire? Yes, though it was smaller then, you and yours gave me excellent motivation to grow it. Why? The word came out strangled. Why let us paint? You as beneath us? Why let Rebecca grow up believing? Because you'd have destroyed me if you'd known the truth, I said simply. A woman who dared to earn more than your son? Who succeeded without your family's connections or approval? You'd have used every resource to crush me and take Rebecca completely. So I became what you expected, harmless, poor, no threat to the Morrison legacy. Diane's laugh was bitter. And now? What's your plan now? Now? I looked around. The room full of powerful people, none of whom held any real importance to me. Now I'm just trying to remember who I am when I'm not pretending to be less. She studied me with new eyes. Rebecca doesn't know, does she? That's why she's been distant. She knows now. Found out 5 days ago. Currently processing. 35 years of deception. God. Diane pressed a hand to her chest. We did this. Robert and I, with our pride and prejudice. We forced you underground, and Rebecca paid the price. It was the closest to an apology I'd ever get from a Morrison. I accepted it with a nod, then excused myself. The party had served its purpose, reminding me that Patricia Martin existed beyond the roles of mother and deceiver. The next morning, I finally went to the St. Regis. Not to the room Marcus had mentioned, but to the restaurant where I knew Rebecca took breakfast when she stayed there. Old habits and patterns, learned through decades of distant observation. She was there, sitting. Alone by the window, picking at eggs Benedict she clearly had no appetite for. She looked tired, worn in a way that made my chest ache. Her clothes were immaculate, but her eyes were hollow. I approached slowly, giving her time to see me, to leave if she chose. She didn't move, just watched me with an expression I couldn't read. May I? I gestured to the empty chair. She nodded once, sharply. I sat, ordered coffee when the waiter approached, then waited. The silence stretched between us, waited with everything unsaid. Finally, she spoke. Do you own this hotel too? Through a subsidiary, yes. She laughed, short and bitter. Of course you do. Is there anywhere in this city I can go that you don't own? Several places. I can make you a list if it would help. That surprised her enough to almost smile. God, this is surreal. My mother the mogul, offering to map out the parts of the city where I can avoid her influence. I never meant for it to be like this, I said softly. Which part? The lying? The manipulation? The part where you let me treat you badly because I thought you were beneath me. All of it. Any of it. I made choices based on fear and called it love. I protected you from truths you had every right to know. I let my deception become more important than our relationship. She pushed eggs around her plate, building and destroying small yellow mountains. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not even the money. It's that I don't know what was real. Every memory I have is tainted now. Every lesson you taught me, every struggle we shared, every moment I thought was genuine, it was all built on lies. Not all of it, I protested. My love was real. The time we spent together, the conversations we had. Were they? How can I know? When you're capable of maintaining a deception for 3 decades, how can I trust anything you've ever said? Or done? I had no answer that would satisfy her. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be rebuilt with words alone. I've been talking to Dad, she said suddenly. He's in London now, married to wife number 4. I kept my face neutral despite the pain his name still caused. How is Daniel? Shocked, guilty, angry at his parents for creating the situation, angry at you for your response to it. Angry at himself for not seeing it. She met my eyes. He said you were brilliant when he met you. Said he was attracted to your ambition until it exceeded his own. Your father preferred women as accessories, not equals. And you preferred being seen as less than rather than risk losing access to me. Yes. That's sick, Mom. You realize that, right? The whole thing is completely dysfunctional. I know. I set down my coffee cup carefully. I've spent 5 days confronting just how dysfunctional it was. How my fears and his prejudices created a maze we all got lost in. I've been trying to understand, she continued, trying to put myself in your place. Young mother, building a business, fighting for custody against a wealthy family. I get why you made the initial choice. But Mom, I was 7 when Dad remarried. 10 when his parents died. 15 when he lost most of his money in bad investments. You could have told me the truth at any point after that. Could I? Hi, honey. Surprise. Everything you know about me is false. Your poor mother is actually rich. All those times you worried about my finances, felt guilty for having more than me, tried to help with your allowance money, it was all unnecessary. By the way, I've been secretly pulling strings in your life the whole time. It would have been better than this, she gestured between us. Better than finding out at 35 that my entire identity was built on a foundation of lies. You're right, I admitted. I should have told you. When you graduated high school, or college, or got married, a dozen moments when truth would have been kinder than continued deception. But I was a coward. The lie had become so big, so encompassing, that I couldn't see past it. Rebecca signaled for more coffee, buying time. When the waiter left, she said, I've been reading about you, real articles, not the puff pieces I used to skip. You're kind of amazing, you know? What you've built, how you've built it, the innovations, the ethical practices, the way you've lifted other women in business. While letting my own daughter think I was nobody special. That's the thing. You were special. Even as Pat the teacher, you were special. The way you loved me, supported me, encouraged me. I just couldn't see it because I'd bought into Dad's family's values. Success meant money, meant status, meant the right clothes and the right connections. I could have shown you different values while being honest about who I was. Could you? Or would I have just become another trust fund kid, expecting the, world to bend to my whim? She laughed, but it was sad. Maybe your deception saved me from becoming insufferable. You were never insufferable. Confused sometimes, influenced by people who valued the wrong things, but never insufferable. I literally made you walk home in the rain rather than let my friends see your car. You were protecting your image in a world that judges harshly. I understood that. I'd been doing the same thing, just from a different angle. We sat in silence again, but it felt different this time. Less sharp, more contemplative. I don't know how to move forward, Rebecca finally admitted. I can't unknow what I know, can't unfeel the betrayal, but I also can't seem to hate you, the way I feel like I should. You're still my mother. Just more. I don't need you to forgive me, I said. Not quickly, maybe not ever. I just need you to know that beneath all the deception, my love for you was the only thing that was. Always true. Love based on lies is still a lie, Mom. No, I said firmly. Love despite lies, around lies, through lies, but never a lie itself. I made terrible choices about how to express it, but the love was real. Is real. She looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to reconcile the woman in designer clothes with the mother in thrift store finds. I see her sometimes. Pat, in your eyes, your smile. She's still there. She was always me, just a limited edition. That got a real smile, small but genuine. A limited edition that drove a Honda held together by rust and hope. That car's still in my garage, between the Bentley and the Mercedes. Bernard. Keeps threatening to have it towed. You kept it? I kept everything that mattered. The car, the apartment, the clothes, props in a play that ran too long, but also reminders of who we were together, who we still might be, if you're willing. Rebecca reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but close. I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying I forgive you or that I'm ready to have you back in my life fully, but I'm not saying no either. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. It's more than I deserve and exactly what I need to hear. I might need therapy to process this. More therapy, I mean. I'll need it too. 35 years of deception, probably. Requires professional help to untangle. You? Therapy? Pat Martin would never. Pat Martin would never do a lot of things. Patricia Martin, on the other hand, has excellent mental health coverage. She actually laughed at that, the sound bright in the morning air. This is going to be weird, isn't it? Learning who you really are? Probably, but maybe weird is better than false. Maybe. She glanced at her watch. I have a meeting. At Morrison Industries, the company my secretly wealthy mother probably has shares in. 17% through various holdings. Not enough for control, just enough to keep an eye on things. Of course. She shook her head, but she was almost smiling. We're going to need ground rules going forward. No more secret manipulations. No pulling strings without telling me. No mysterious benefactor nonsense. Agreed. Full transparency from here on out. And I get to see everything. The houses, the companies, the whole empire. If I'm going to understand who you really are, I need to see it all. Whenever you're ready. She stood, gathering her things with the efficient movements I recognized from childhood. My daughter, organizing her world. I'll call you. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. We'll figure this out. Whatever this becomes. Take your time. I've waited 35 years. I can wait a little longer. She paused, looking down at me. The woman at Dad's parents' parties, the one who navigated their world with grace while they treated her like dirt, was that the real you showing through? That was me refusing to be diminished even while playing diminished, if that makes sense. It does, more than I'd like it to. She started to leave, then turned back. The literacy charity gala was in the paper this morning. Nice dress. Thank you. It felt good to wear something that fit properly for once. I bet. She hesitated, then added, Mom? The next time it rains, take the Bentley. Or better yet, let Bernard drive. You're too old to be making points about pride in bad weather. Yes, dear, I said, and for just a moment, we were simply mother and daughter again. After she left, I sat in the restaurant a while longer, watching the city wake up outside. The sun was breaking through clouds, casting everything in gold. It felt prophetic somehow, like light finally reaching places that had been dark too long. My phone buzzed. Harrison, probably, or someone from one of the boards. The empire of Patricia Martin required constant attention. But for once, I didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, I sat with the remnants of shared breakfast, the ghost of my daughter's almost smile, and the possibility that honesty, however belated, might still have power to heal. The road ahead was uncertain. Rebecca might forgive me, or she might not. We might rebuild our relationship on truth instead of lies, or we might discover that too much damage had been done. But at least now we were dealing with reality instead of fiction. At least now she knew who I really was, all of me, not just the carefully curated version I'd presented for decades. Patricia Martin, mother and mogul, deceiver and protector, billionaire in hiding, and woman finally exposed. It was messy and complicated and nothing like the simple narrative I'd tried to maintain. But it was true. And after 35 years of lies, truth felt like the greatest luxury of all. I paid the check, my hotel, my restaurant, my money finally visible, and walked out into the morning. The city stretched before me, full of buildings I owned, companies I controlled, people whose lives I'd influenced from shadow. But none of that mattered as much as the promise of a phone call from my daughter, sometime soon, when she was ready to know the mother I'd always been beneath the masquerade. The valet brought the Bentley around, and this time I didn't hesitate to get in. No more Honda, no more pretense, no more careful calibration of appearance. Just me, complicated and flawed and real, hoping that authenticity might succeed where deception had failed. As Bernard drove me home, to the mansion this time, not the apartment, I pulled out my phone and deleted the app I used to track Rebecca's location, No more watching from the shadows. If we were going to move forward, it had to be in the light, with all our truths exposed and all our choices visible. It was terrifying, this honesty. But it was also liberating. For the first time in 35 years, I didn't have to remember which lie I'd told to whom, didn't have to maintain the exhausting fiction of poverty. I could simply be Patricia Martin, whoever that turned out to be. The mansion gates opened smoothly, welcoming me home. But home, I was learning, wasn't about the size of the house or the numbers in the bank account. It was about the people who knew your true self and chose to love you anyway. And maybe, just maybe, my daughter would make that choice again. Time would tell. But for now, I had truth on my side. And that was a fortune worth more than all the money I'd hidden away. The rain had stopped. The storm had passed. And somewhere in the distance, I could almost see the possibility of a rainbow. The call came. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my study. The familiar ringtone made my heart skip, and I set aside documents worth millions to answer my daughter's voice. "Mom?" Rebecca's tone was cautious but not hostile. "Are you free for lunch tomorrow? There's something I'd like to show you." The something turned out to be an art gallery in Soho, one I'd never heard of despite my extensive knowledge of the city's cultural landscape. Rebecca met me outside, dressed in a way that reminded me of her college years. Jeans, boots, a vintage leather jacket that had seen better days but still carried elegance. "This is new," I said, gesturing to the gallery's minimalist storefront. 3 months old. The owner is someone I went to school with. Maya Chen. You probably remember her from my graduation. I did remember. A quiet girl with observant eyes who'd stood apart from Rebecca's more boisterous classmates. I'd liked her immediately, though we'd barely spoken. Inside, the gallery was a study in controlled chaos. Paintings in vibrant colors hung beside stark, black and white photographs. Sculptures made from reclaimed materials sat next to delicate watercolors. It was eclectic in a way that spoke to genuine curatorial vision rather than commercial appeal. Maya appeared from the back office, her smile genuine when she saw me. "Mrs. Martin, Rebecca said you might stop by. Welcome to Convergence." "It's beautiful," I said, and meant it. "You've created something special here." "Thank you. It's been a labor of love, though the financial reality is challenging. Most galleries either show established artists with guaranteed sales or completely unknown artists willing to pay for wall space. I'm trying to find a middle ground, emerging. Artists who deserve exposure but can't afford to buy their way in. Rebecca watched me carefully as Maya spoke, and I understood why we were here. This wasn't just lunch. This was a test. A way to see how I'd respond when faced with someone who genuinely needed help. The art world can be brutal for emerging. Talent, I agreed. Especially for artists who don't have connections or inherited wealth to smooth the path. Exactly. Maya's eyes lit up. I've been trying to create a different model. Sliding scale commissions, profit-sharing agreements, mentorship programs. But it's hard to sustain without steady funding. I walked slowly through the space, genuinely admiring the work. In one corner hung a series of photographs that captured urban decay and renewal in stunning detail. The price tags were modest, reflecting Maya's commitment to accessibility rather than profit maximization. "These are remarkable," I said, pausing, before a particularly striking image of a demolished building with flowers growing through the rubble. "Who's the photographer?" "David Reeves. He's been documenting neighborhood gentrification for 5 years. That's actually part of a larger series about resilience in urban environments." "I'd like to see the rest of the series," I said, "and perhaps discuss acquisition." Maya's eyes widened. "The entire series? That would change everything for David. And for the gallery." Rebecca stepped forward. "Mom, Maya wasn't asking for—" "I know," I said gently. I'm not offering help. I'm recognizing value and acting on it. There's a difference. We spent the next hour walking through the gallery while Maya explained her vision. She wanted to create artist residencies, educational programs, community outreach initiatives. Her passion was infectious, her ideas sound, her execution limited only by resources. When we finally left for lunch, Rebecca was quiet, thoughtful, in a way I recognized from her childhood. You liked her, she said, as we settled into a corner booth at a nearby bistro. I liked her vision, and her integrity. She's trying to change a system rather than just succeed within it. She reminds me of someone else I know, Rebecca said pointedly. Your father would have called her naive, idealistic, unrealistic about market forces. And you? I think she's exactly what the art world needs. Someone who cares more about artists than profit margins. Rebecca studied me across the table. Is that why you did it? Built your empire while pretending to be poor? Because you cared more about something than profit? The question caught me off guard with its directness. In part, I wanted to prove that success didn't require abandoning values, that you could build something significant while still treating people fairly. But you didn't treat me fairly. Not with the truth. No, I admitted. I didn't. I treated you like a child who couldn't handle complex realities, even when you were 34 years old. She laughed, short and sharp. God, when you put it like that, it sounds even worse. It was worse. I robbed you of agency, of the right to make informed decisions about our relationship. I told myself I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from having to face your potential rejection of who I actually am. Rebecca picked at her salad, building patterns with the greens. I've been thinking about that. About rejection. You were so afraid I'd reject the real you that you made me reject a fake version instead. Self-fulfilling prophecy meets self-sabotage. Yes. The thing is, I don't think I would have rejected the real you. Not when I was younger. Kids are remarkably adaptable, especially when it comes to their parents' quirks. I felt something twist in my chest. You really think so? I know so. Remember when I was 12 and found out Mrs. Henderson next door was actually a retired circus performer? I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I begged her to teach me juggling. I did remember. Rebecca had come home breathless with excitement, full of stories about sequined costumes and crowds under the big top. You said it explained why she was so good at balancing grocery bags. Exactly. If you'd told me then that my mom was secretly a business genius who owned half the city, I would have thought it was amazing. I would have bragged about it at school. The regret hit me like a physical force. All those years of careful distance, of managed expectations, of love constrained by lies. I'm sorry, I said, the words feeling inadequate. I'm so sorry I took that choice away from you. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back 35 years of authentic relationship with my mother. We ate in contemplative silence for a while. Then Rebecca said, I want to see it all, the real scope of what you've built, not just the numbers, but the impact, the people whose lives you've affected. Are you sure? It's extensive. I'm sure. If I'm going to understand who Patricia Martin really is, I need the full picture. The tour took 3 days. We started with Menton Industries, where I walked Rebecca through facilities she'd only heard about in business school case studies. She watched me interact with employees who clearly respected and even loved their enigmatic boss, saw the profit-sharing programs and educational initiatives I'd implemented, witnessed the innovation labs where brilliant minds worked on solutions to global problems. The employee satisfaction ratings here are legendary, she said as we left the main building. I studied them in my MBA program. Never knew I was studying my mother's management philosophy. Everything I learned about leadership, I learned, from being a mother first I told her. How to motivate without manipulating, how to guide without controlling, how to invest in potential rather than just performance. Except you forgot all those lessons when it came to actually being my mother. Touché. The second day was devoted to the charitable foundation I'd established years earlier. Rebecca met scholarship recipients whose educations I'd funded, toured community centers I'd built, visited innovation hubs where entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds launched their dreams. "This is incredible," she said, watching a young woman present her business plan to a panel of mentors. "How many people do you think you've helped over the years?" "I don't keep count. The point isn't the numbers, it's the ripple effects. Every person we help goes on to help others. It compounds. Like interest on a loan. Like love properly invested." On the third day, we visited the properties, the apartment buildings I'd converted to affordable housing, the commercial spaces I'd leased below market rate to small businesses, the research facilities where scientists worked on climate solutions. But it was our final stop that seemed to affect Rebecca most. A small office building in Queens housed a literacy program I'd supported for over a decade. Children from kindergarten through high school came after school for tutoring, homework help, and enrichment activities. Miss Patricia, a group of elementary school children surrounded me as we entered, their faces bright with recognition and affection. "You came to read to us." "Not today, sweethearts," I said, hugging each one. "But I brought someone special. This is my daughter, Rebecca." They accepted her immediately, as children do, pulling her toward art projects and book displays, chattering about their favorite stories and proudest achievements. I watched her interact with them, saw the natural ease she'd inherited from me, the genuine interest in their small but significant lives. "How long have you been coming here?" she asked later as we drove back toward Manhattan. "Every month. For 11 years. It started as a site visit for due diligence, became a tradition I couldn't break. These kids have taught me more about resilience and joy than any business school ever could. They love you. I love them. Unconditionally. Uncomplicated. No pretense required." Rebecca was quiet for several blocks. Then she said, "You know what's strange? Seeing you like this, in your real element, with people who know who you actually are, you seem more like the mother I remember from childhood, more like Pat." "How so?" "Present, engaged, authentic in your affection, when you were pretending. To be struggling financially, you had to hold back so much. But with those kids, with your employees, with Maya at the gallery, you're fully yourself." It was an insight that stunned me with its accuracy. I never thought of it that way. But you're right, the disguise wasn't just about money. It was about dimming every part of myself to maintain the illusion. No wonder I always felt like something was missing. There was a whole dimension of you that you couldn't let me see. We drove through the city streets, past buildings I owned and businesses I'd supported, through neighborhoods where my influence had quietly shaped development and opportunity. It was my empire, invisible to most, but undeniably real. "I have a proposition," Rebecca said as we neared my mansion. "Something that might help us move forward. I'm listening. I want to work with you, not for you, with you. I want to understand your business philosophy from the inside. Learn how you've managed to build something this significant while maintaining ethical standards. And I want to help you find ways to be more public about your philanthropy. Rebecca, you have your own career. At a company you partly own, working on projects you've probably influenced. I'd rather be intentional about it. Besides, I think we both need to learn who we are when we're being completely honest with each other." The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. Working closely with Rebecca would mean constant exposure, no hiding behind carefully managed interactions. But it might also be a chance to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of truth, rather than fiction. What did you have in mind? A new venture. Something we create together from the ground up. Maybe a foundation focused on supporting women, entrepreneurs, or a network of galleries like Maya's. Something that combines your resources with my fresh perspective. And if we disagree on approach or philosophy, then we'll argue about it honestly, like adults, like business partners, like mother and daughter who finally trust each other enough to fight constructively. I pulled into my driveway, the gates closing behind us with their familiar whisper. The mansion loomed ahead, beautiful and imposing. And finally, potentially, a place where Rebecca might feel welcome. "There's something else," she said as we sat in the car. "I want to stay here tonight, in the house. I want to see how you actually live, not the performance you put on for my benefit." "Are you sure? There's a lot to process. Secret passages and hidden safes, and probably more luxury than you're prepared for." "I've been processing it. For weeks. Time to stop analyzing and start experiencing." That night, I gave Rebecca the full tour. The wine cellar with bottles worth more than cars. The library with its rolling ladders and first edition collections. The art that graced every wall, some pieces she recognized from museums, others that were completely unique to my collection. The safe room with its walls of monitors showing feeds from properties around the globe. "This is insane," she said, standing in my master bedroom with its view of the city skyline. "You've been living like royalty while I thought you were counting pennies." Guilty as charged. "The guest room where I'm staying, it's bigger than my first apartment. It's also been ready for you for 2 years, ever since you moved next door. I kept hoping you'd visit, that we'd reconcile, that I'd find the courage to tell you the truth." She moved to the window, looking out at her own house just visible through the trees. "I can see my bedroom from here. You could probably watch. Me with binoculars." "I never did that," I said quickly. "I had security monitor the general area for safety, but I never invaded your privacy." "I know. I can tell the difference now between protection and intrusion. You may have lied about who you were, but you never violated my boundaries in ways that actually mattered." We talked until nearly dawn, sitting in my living room with tea and the kind of honesty that only comes in the deep hours of night. Rebecca asked questions I'd never expected to answer, about loneliness and ambition and the price of success. I asked her about the woman she'd become without my influence, about her dreams and fears, and the ways she'd been shaped by believing her mother was ordinary. "I think I understand now why you did it," she said, as the first light began to creep through the windows. "Not the execution, but the impulse. You wanted me to love you for who you were, not what you had." "Yes, but I went about it all wrong. Instead of trusting you to see past wealth to the person beneath, I hid the wealth and lost pieces of the person in the process." "Well," she said, stretching like a cat in the expensive armchair, "we can't change the past. But we can be intentional about the future." "Partners?" "Partners, in business and in figuring out how to be family again." She stayed for breakfast, and I watched her interact with Bernard and Margaret as they served eggs Benedict and fresh fruit. She was gracious but not deferential, curious about their roles without being invasive. They responded to her with warmth, clearly pleased to finally meet the daughter they'd heard about for so many years. "They're lovely," she said after they'd left us alone. "How long have they worked for you?" "Bernard, 15 years, Margaret, 12. They're more like family than employees at this point." "Do they know about the whole Pat Martin thing?" "They know I had reasons for maintaining privacy about my relationship with you. They don't judge, they just support." "I like them. I can see why you trust them." After breakfast, we walked through the gardens behind the house. The grounds were extensive, professionally maintained but designed to feel natural rather than formal. Rebecca stopped at a bench overlooking a small pond. "This is where you've been all this time," she said. "Not in some modest apartment counting pennies, but here, in paradise." Paradise is only paradise when you have someone to share it with, I said. It's been beautiful and empty and very, very quiet. Not anymore, she said. If we're doing this, if we're building something together, you won't be alone anymore. And if it doesn't work, if we discover we're too different or too damaged by the years of deception, then we'll figure that out too. But Mom, we've spent 35 years building a relationship on a foundation of lies. We can at least try building one on truth. She was right. We owed it to ourselves, to the mother and daughter we'd been and the women we'd become, to try again with honesty as our starting point. That afternoon, Rebecca moved out of the St. Regis and into the guest room at my mansion. Not permanently. She kept her own house, her own space, her own independence. But symbolically, the gesture meant everything. She was choosing to be part of my real life, rather than the performance I'd maintained for decades. We spent the evening planning our new venture, sketching ideas and debating approaches with the kind of intellectual sparring I'd never allowed myself to enjoy with her before. She was brilliant, innovative, unafraid to challenge my assumptions or propose radical alternatives. "You know what the best part of this is?" she said as we worked late into the night. "What's that?" "I finally get to meet my mother. The real one. After 35 years of wondering who Patricia Martin really was, I'm going to find out. And I get to meet the daughter I raised without knowing it. The woman who inherited my values despite being raised to believe I didn't have them. We're quite a pair, aren't we? The secret billionaire and the daughter who never knew her own mother." We are indeed. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows. But this time, neither of us was walking through it alone. We were together, finally, in the light of truth that would illuminate whatever came next. The storm had passed, the secrets were revealed, and the real work of loving each other authentically could finally begin. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't pretending to be anyone other than exactly who I was, and my daughter was there to witness it, to participate in it, to help me become even more myself than I'd ever been alone. It was the beginning of something new, something real, something that couldn't be washed away by rain or damaged by time, because it was built on the strongest foundation possible, the truth, finally told, and love, finally free to be itself. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of our new headquarters, watching Rebecca command the attention of 12 venture capitalists with the same quiet authority I'd learned to wield decades earlier. The Catalyst Foundation had officially launched, and she was presenting our first quarterly report to our advisory board. "Our portfolio companies have exceeded projected growth targets by an average of 40%, she said, clicking through slides that showed the faces of entrepreneurs we'd supported. More importantly, 93% of our investments have gone to women and minority-owned businesses that were previously unable to access traditional funding." The room buzzed with approval. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were lives changed, dreams realized, barriers broken. I felt the familiar swell of pride, but this time it was doubled. Pride in the work we were doing, and pride in the woman my daughter had become. After the presentation, as the board members filed out discussing follow-up meetings and expansion opportunities, Rebecca flopped into the chair beside mine with theatrical exhaustion. "Well?" she asked. "How did I do?" "You were magnificent," I said, and meant it. "Though I think you enjoyed making Harrison squirm when he questioned our due diligence process. He deserved it. Just because we're backing unconventional candidates doesn't mean we're being careless with our analysis." Harrison Blackwell, my longtime attorney, had been skeptical when Rebecca and I first announced our partnership. Not because he doubted her abilities, but because he'd seen too many businesses destroyed by unresolved personal conflicts. His caution had been wise, though ultimately unnecessary. "He's coming around," I observed. "Did you see him taking notes during your presentation?" Probably calculating how much money we're going to make him when these companies go public, Rebecca laughed. Speaking of which, Maya called this morning. The gallery is officially profitable for the first time since opening. Maya Chen had been our first investment, though we hadn't formalized the foundation yet. 6 months of steady funding and business, mentorship had transformed Convergence from a struggling idealistic venture into a sustainable operation that was beginning to attract national attention. She's asked us to the opening of her next show, Rebecca continued. Local artists responding to gentrification should be interesting. I'll put it on the calendar. These casual exchanges still felt like small miracles to me. 6 months of working together, living in the same house when Rebecca chose to stay over, sharing meals and conversations and the daily rhythms of a life lived in truth. The awkwardness had faded gradually, replaced by something deeper and more authentic than what we'd shared before. We drove home together that evening, Rebecca behind the wheel of her Tesla while I reviewed proposals for our next round of investments. The dynamic worked. She handled the technological aspects of our operation while I provided strategic guidance and capital. Neither of us had to pretend to be anything other than exactly who we were. Dinner with the Vanderbilts tonight, she reminded me as we turned into our shared driveway. Are you ready for that particular brand of social torture? Claire Vanderbilt, Marcus's new wife, had extended an invitation to what she called a small gathering to celebrate their first wedding anniversary. Rebecca had accepted, partly out of curiosity and partly to demonstrate that she harbored no lingering resentment about her failed marriage. I'm ready to be myself, I said, which seems to terrify people more than my wealth ever did. The party was held at the Vanderbilt estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling Georgian mansion that had been in the family for 4 generations. Old money, established society, the kind of gathering where conversations were conducted in careful code, and everyone knew exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. Rebecca and I entered together, her hand resting lightly on my arm. I wore a dress that cost more than most people's cars, with jewelry that would have funded a small country's education budget. No more hiding. No more dimming my light to avoid uncomfortable questions. The ripple of recognition through the room was immediate and electric. Patricia Martin, the phantom billionaire, was making her social debut alongside her daughter. Conversations stuttered, glasses paused halfway to lips, and every eye in the room tracked our progress across the marble floor. Marcus approached first, his new wife trailing behind with an expression that suggested she'd been coached on how to handle this encounter. Rebecca, he said, kissing her cheek with perfunctory politeness. Mrs. Martin, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting us, I replied smoothly. Congratulations on your anniversary. Claire stepped forward, her smile bright and clearly rehearsed. It's such a pleasure to finally meet you, Mrs. Martin. Marcus has told me so much about your interesting business ventures. Has he? I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. I'm surprised he knows anything about them, given how little attention he paid to business during his marriage to my daughter. Rebecca made a sound that might have been a cough or a suppressed laugh. Claire's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. Yes, well, Marcus has been much more focused on his career lately, haven't you, darling? Marcus nodded, though his eyes were fixed on Rebecca with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, perhaps, or calculation. With Marcus, it was often difficult to tell the difference. We moved through the party, navigating conversations that felt like elaborate dances around unspoken truths. Everyone wanted to know about my business empire, about the foundation, about the sudden visibility of a woman who'd been invisible for decades. I answered their questions with polite directness, neither apologizing for my success nor flaunting it unnecessarily. Patricia Martin, said a voice behind me, and I turned to find Diane Morrison, my former mother-in-law, approaching with what appeared to be genuine warmth. You look radiant. Thank you, Diane. You look well. I am well. Better than I've been in years, actually. Having a conscience clear of old prejudices is remarkably liberating. She'd reached out several times since our encounter at the charity gala, attempting to rebuild the bridge her family had burned decades earlier. I'd been cautious but not dismissive. Forgiveness was a process, not a decision. How is Rebecca adjusting to your revelation? See for yourself, I said, nodding toward where Rebecca was deep in conversation with a group of younger professionals. She was animated, confident, entirely herself in a way she'd rarely been at these gatherings during her marriage to Marcus. She's bloomed, Diane observed. I always suspected she was holding herself back, but I never understood why. Now I realize she was trying to fit into a shape that wasn't naturally hers. She's extraordinary, I agreed. Always was. I just gave her permission to show it. As the evening progressed, I noticed Marcus watching Rebecca with increasing intensity. He approached her during a lull in the conversation, and I moved closer, not to eavesdrop, but to be available if needed. You look happy, he was saying. Different. More like yourself. I am myself, Rebecca replied simply. For the first time in a long time. Working with your mother seems to suit you. It does. We make a good team. I always wondered what you might have accomplished if you hadn't been so. He paused, searching for the right word. Ashamed? Rebecca supplied. Convinced that I had to choose between family loyalty and social acceptance? Yes, those were productive years, weren't they? I didn't mean... You meant exactly that, she said, not unkindly, but with finality. And you were right, in a way. I was holding myself back, trying to fit into expectations that weren't authentic to who I really am. But that's over now. Marcus glanced toward me, then back to Rebecca. And what about us? I know we're divorced, but there was real love there once. Could there be again, now that you're free? The audacity of the question stunned me. Here was a man who'd left my daughter for a woman with more accessible wealth, now attempting to reclaim her after discovering she had access to more money than he'd ever imagined. Rebecca's laugh was soft but not cruel. Marcus, you left me for someone you thought was a better financial prospect. You're married to her, and now you're asking if there's still a chance for us because you've discovered my mother is wealthy? Do you hear? Yourself. It's not about the money. It's always been about the money with you. The difference is that now you know where mine really comes from. She walked away then, leaving Marcus standing alone by the bar. I followed her onto the terrace where she stood looking out at the manicured gardens. Are you all right? I asked. I'm perfect, she said, and she sounded it. For the first time in my adult life, I know exactly who I am and what I want. It's incredibly liberating. And what do you want? To build something meaningful with my mother, to change the world in small but significant ways, to be authentic in every relationship and every decision. She turned to me with a smile that reminded me of the little girl she'd once been. To never again pretend to be less than I am. We left the party early, driving back to the city in comfortable silence. The lights of Manhattan glittered ahead of us, and I thought about how different this drive felt from the one I'd taken 6 months earlier, alone and rain-soaked, wondering if I'd lost my daughter forever. I have something to tell you, Rebecca said as we entered the house. I've been offered a position, Chief Innovation Officer at Stellar Dynamics. Stellar Dynamics was one of the most prestigious tech companies in the world, the kind of opportunity that would have been irresistible just a year ago. My heart sank, though I tried not to show it. That's wonderful, I said carefully. It's exactly the kind of role you've been working toward. It is. 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, I would have jumped at it. But now? She shook her head. I told them I was flattered but not interested. I'm exactly where I want to be. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt. Rebecca, I don't want you to limit your opportunities because of our foundation. If this is what you want, it's not what I want, she said firmly. What I want is to build something with you. Something that matters. Something that couldn't exist without both of us. We talked late into the night about our plans for the foundation, about the companies we wanted to support, about the systemic changes we hoped to create. It was the kind of conversation I dreamed of having with her for decades. Two minds working in harmony, each strengthening the other. I love you, she said, as we finally headed upstairs to bed. Not because you're wealthy, not because you can open doors for me, but because you're my mother. Because you raised me to be independent and strong and ethical. Because you taught me to judge people by their character rather than their bank accounts. I love you too, I said, the words carrying the weight of 35 years of constrained affection. I always have. I know. That's what made the deception so painful, knowing that the love was real but the context was false. But we're past that now. Are we? We are. Because I choose to be. Because you've chosen to be. Because we're both finally brave enough to be authentic. The next morning brought news that would test that authenticity. Harrison called while we were having breakfast, his voice tight with concern. Patricia, we have a problem. Someone's leaked information about your financial involvement in Rebecca's career. The business press is calling it nepotism, suggesting that her success is entirely due to your behind-the-scenes manipulation. Rebecca listened. To my side of the conversation, her face growing serious. When I hung up, she was already reaching for her laptop. How bad is it? She asked, pulling up news sites. Bad enough. The story is positioning you as a puppet and me as a puppet master who's been pulling strings for decades. She read in silence for several minutes, her expression growing darker with each article. Finally, she closed the laptop and looked at me. Well, she said, I guess we're about to find out what authentic really means. The media firestorm that followed was intense but brief. Rebecca handled it with a grace I couldn't have imagined, giving interviews that were both honest and dignified. She acknowledged my influence while clearly articulating her own achievements, refusing to be diminished by accusations of nepotism. My mother created opportunities, she told one particularly aggressive interviewer. I took advantage of them. But opportunity, without capability, is worthless. I earned everything I achieved, even if the doors were opened by someone who loved me. The controversy actually strengthened our foundation's reputation. Here was a woman who could have coasted on inherited wealth, but instead chose to create value, to lift others, to use her advantages in service of something larger than herself. The best part, Rebecca said a week later as we reviewed the coverage, is that we handled it together. No secrets, no deception, just truth and transparency. Even when the truth was uncomfortable. Especially then. That's what authenticity means, being honest even when it's hard. 3 months later, we celebrated the Foundation's first anniversary with a gala that raised over $10 million for women entrepreneurs. Rebecca gave the keynote speech, speaking about resilience and authenticity and the power of truth to transform relationships. A year ago, she told the audience, I thought I knew who I was and who my mother was. I was wrong about both. But being wrong led me to something better. A relationship built on truth rather than assumptions, on mutual respect rather than managed expectations. I watched from the front row, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. The rain-soaked night that had seemed like an ending was actually a beginning. The lies that had poisoned our relationship for decades had finally been cleansed by honesty. After the event, as we cleaned up and prepared to leave, Rebecca found me in the empty ballroom. Thank you, she said. For what? For being brave? Enough to tell me the truth. For being patient while I processed it. for showing me what authentic success looks like. Thank you for being brave enough to hear it, for choosing to rebuild rather than retreat, for becoming my partner in every sense of the word. We stood in the empty room, surrounded by the detritus of a successful evening. Empty glasses, crumpled napkins, the lingering scent of expensive flowers. It was a metaphor for our journey, I thought. Beautiful moments built on the foundation of past pain, success arising from the ashes of failure. So what now? Rebecca asked. We've built something amazing, but what's next? Whatever we want, I said. That's the beauty of truth. It gives you infinite possibilities. I want to expand internationally. Find women entrepreneurs in developing countries who need not just funding but mentorship and connections. I want to establish scholarship, programs for girls from low-income families. Education is the greatest equalizer. I want to create a network of galleries like Maya's, supporting artists who have something to say but no platform to say it. I want to build affordable housing. That doesn't look like affordable housing. Dignity shouldn't be a luxury. We were both talking faster now, ideas flowing between us with the kind of creative energy that comes from perfect collaboration. We could start a program for women returning to the workforce after raising children, I suggested. Or support female scientists whose research is overlooked because they're working in male-dominated fields, Rebecca added. We could create a foundation that funds other foundations, multiplying our impact exponentially. We could change the world, she said, and for the first time in decades, I believed it was possible. Walking out of the ballroom together, I thought about the woman I'd become in the past year. Not Pat Martin, the fictional schoolteacher who'd lived in shadows and shame. Not even the hidden Patricia Martin who'd built an empire while wearing a mask. But some new version, authentic, visible, unafraid to be seen in all my complexity. Thank you for walking through the rain with me, I said as we reached the car. Thank you for finally letting me see the mansion, Rebecca replied. We drove, home through the quiet streets, past buildings I owned and businesses I'd supported, through neighborhoods where my influence had quietly shaped opportunity and growth. But none of that mattered as much as the woman beside me, the daughter who'd found her way back to me through truth and courage, and the kind of love that can survive anything. The next morning, as I sat in my study reviewing proposals for our next round of investments, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't pretending to be anyone other than exactly who I was, and my daughter was there to witness it, to participate in it, to help me become even more myself than I'd ever been alone. The rain had stopped. The storm had passed, and what remained was real. Messy and complicated and beautiful in its authenticity. We'd built something together that couldn't be washed away by weather or damaged by time, because it was built on the strongest foundation possible. The truth finally told, and love finally free to be itself. Outside my window, the city stretched endlessly, full of possibilities we'd only begun to explore. Inside, my daughter was planning our next venture, her voice carrying the same note of passionate determination that had driven me to build an empire in the first place. We were Patricia and Rebecca Martin, mother and daughter, partners in business and life, no longer hiding behind masks or managed expectations. We were authentic, visible, unafraid to be seen in all our complexity and contradiction. And we were just getting started. 2 years have passed since that rain-soaked night when I walked away from my daughter's party, carrying the weight of decades of deception on my shoulders. As I sit in my study this morning, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and possibility, I can barely recognize the woman I was then. The secrets that once defined me have been replaced by something far more powerful, the freedom to be authentically myself. The Catalyst Foundation has exceeded every projection we dared to make. Rebecca and I have funded over 200 women-owned businesses, established scholarship programs in 12 countries, and created a network of galleries and cultural centers that span 3 continents. Our success isn't measured only in dollars or return on investment, though both have been remarkable. It's measured in lives transformed, barriers broken, and dreams realized by women who simply needed someone to believe in their potential. Rebecca has become everything I always knew she could be and more. Watching her command boardrooms, negotiate complex deals, and inspire entrepreneurs half her age fills me with a pride that has nothing to do with her connection to me and everything to do with who she's chosen to become. She's taken the values I tried to instill during those carefully orchestrated weekends and elevated them into a philosophy that guides not just our business, but her entire approach to life. The relationship we've built on truth is deeper and more satisfying than anything we shared during those decades of deception. We argue now, sometimes fiercely, about strategy and ethics and the best way to create lasting change. But our disagreements come from a place of mutual respect and shared purpose. She challenges my assumptions, pushes me to think differently, and isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. In return, I offer the wisdom that comes from experience and the perspective that age provides. We've become true partners in every sense of the word. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to teach Rebecca authentic values by hiding my wealth, I nearly destroyed our relationship entirely. The very thing I was protecting her from, the corrosive effects of money on character, almost consumed us both through the lies I told to avoid it. Money, I've learned, isn't inherently corrupting. What corrupts is dishonesty, manipulation, and the belief that love can be conditional on anything other than love itself. Maya Chen's gallery has become a cornerstone of New York's emerging art scene, and her success has inspired dozens of similar ventures across the country. We've learned that supporting women entrepreneurs isn't just good business, it's essential for creating the kind of economy that works for everyone. When women succeed, families thrive, communities strengthen, and innovation flourishes. The ripple effects of our investments extend far beyond the individual businesses we support. I think often about the children at the Literacy Center in Queens, where I still volunteer every month. They know me now as Miss Patricia, the lady who reads stories and asks about their dreams. To them, I'm not a billionaire or a business mogul. I'm simply someone who shows up consistently, who listens to their small but significant concerns, who believes in their potential without reservation. Their honesty and enthusiasm remind me daily of what really matters: presence, authenticity, and unconditional love. The mansion next to Rebecca's house has become a gathering place for family dinners, foundation meetings, and quiet evenings, when we simply want to be together. She maintains her own home and independence, but the walls between our properties have become metaphorical rather than literal. We share holidays, celebrations, and the ordinary moments that make up a life, lived in truth. Bernard and Margaret have become Rebecca's champions as much as mine, proud of the woman she's become and the partnership we've forged. They've watched our relationship transform from distant and careful to warm and genuine, and their joy in our reconciliation is evident in every interaction. The household that was once characterized by careful silence now rings with laughter, debate, and the comfortable sounds of a family that has found its way back to itself. Harrison Blackwell, my longtime attorney, recently admitted that he'd been wrong to worry about mixing family and business. Our partnership has been one of the most successful he's ever managed, precisely because it's built on complete honesty and mutual respect. There are no hidden agendas, no unspoken resentments, no power struggles disguised as business decisions. We simply work together toward shared goals, each contributing our unique strengths to achieve something neither could have accomplished alone. The media attention that once felt overwhelming has settled into respectful interest. Rebecca and I are recognized as pioneers in ethical investing and women's entrepreneurship. Universities invite us to speak, business schools use our foundation as a case study, and other philanthropists seek our advice on creating sustainable impact. but the recognition that matters most comes from the women we've supported, who tell us that our belief in them changed the trajectory of their lives. I no longer own the Honda Civic that became such a symbol of my deception. Rebecca insisted we donate it to a single mother in our scholarship program, someone who needed reliable transportation more than we needed a reminder of past mistakes. In its place, I drive whatever suits my mood, sometimes the Bentley, sometimes the Tesla, sometimes nothing at all when I choose to walk through the city I've helped shape. The apartment in Garden Heights has been converted into transitional housing for women escaping domestic violence. The clothes I wore as Pat Martin have been donated to career programs for women re-entering the workforce. The props of my former deception have been transformed into tools for other women's advancement. Even my mistakes have found purpose. As I prepare for another day of meetings and decisions that will affect thousands of lives, I'm struck by how different this morning feels from that rain-soaked evening 2 years ago. Then, I was drowning in the consequences of choices made from fear and sustained by pride. Now, I'm energized by possibilities limited only by imagination and resources that have found their true purpose. Rebecca will arrive soon for our weekly breakfast meeting, where we'll review new proposals and plan our next initiatives. She might challenge something I've written, or propose an idea that makes me see familiar problems in entirely new ways. We'll laugh, we'll argue, we'll dream together about the changes we want to create in the world. The rain has stopped, the storm has passed, and what remains is real, beautifully, messily, authentically real. We've learned that truth, however, painful, is always preferable to the most comfortable lie. We've discovered that love isn't diminished by honesty, but strengthened by it. We've proven that it's never too late to start over, to choose authenticity over appearance, to build something genuine from the ruins of deception. The woman who walked through that storm 2 years ago was carrying the weight of 35 years of lies. The woman I am today carries something far more precious, the joy of being known completely by the person who matters most, and the satisfaction of using my resources to create opportunities for others to live authentically too. This is what redemption looks like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and honest and full of hope for what comes next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.